Daniel, is the mic okay back there? Well, great, I can see my notes too. I'm very happy and very grateful to be here. Thank you so much. I feel just honored, really, that you invited me into this space for a subject that could be controversial for some people. I'm hoping not. And I really actually believe that all of these reasons do fall under living spiritually. I think, yeah. And I'm going to be introducing some critical parts of each area, but the majority are going to be the first two, health and compassion. Because especially if you're talking about a certain way to eat, we need to know that it's healthy, right? Otherwise, there's no argument. You can say, oh, I don't want to, love all the animals, but if we, can't live without animal products, then there's nothing to discuss, So, is anybody surprised that 100% plant-based diet impacts these areas? I was. I never thought that what I chose to eat was anyone else's business, And in a way, it is among the most intimate decisions we make. But since then, in the last 4 years that I've been living this way, I've done an enormous amount of research. And I really try very hard to be as objective as I can and make sure that I'm getting information from reliable sources, and even still that it makes sense to me. So I'm hoping whatever makes sense to you is good, and if it doesn't, no, then it doesn't. We will have a chance for some questions, and I promise I'll only answer questions that I know. If I don't know the answer, I'll say I don't know. So actually our food choices are everybody's business because it affects so many lives. It affects the environment, it affects the economy, it affects food security. So that's why it really is something that a shared experience, as well as the most intimate. It's a very shared experience. And I know there's a lot of spiritual connections people have to different foods as well. So this is a book, it's a children's book by Ruby Roth. And she did all the illustrations herself. So some people may want to introduce this concept to their kids, and there's some really good resources for kids out there. And I love that quote by Maya Angelou about love. Jumps hurdles, leaps fences, sounds like Superman, penetrates walls, full of hope. And that's the one thing I feel strongly about hope is love, is that it brings us hope, And I was talking to Daniel when I was going over the presentation, and we went over this quote, which I love this quote, that we're spiritual beings having a human experience. I also saw we're eternal beings having a temporary experience. I thought that was an interesting one. And there's the picture of the man who coined this quote, who's credited with it. So a choice is based upon being well informed, right? Otherwise, it's just a guess or a habit or a mistake or not. We never really know. So the more well informed we can be, the more choices we have, and the more objective we can be, the better our choices will be. And we were all raised in a culture and a world where eating animals is still considered normal. But as a child, nobody really asked me, do you want to eat the animals? I probably would have said no. I mean, little kids, they love animals. If you took them to a petting zoo and they petted a little lamb and said, honey, would you like to eat that lamb tonight? Yeah, the kid would probably go, ah! So they just, no, And did anybody here think about eating animals when you were a kid? I've heard some people say that they just didn't like that, So, it's really, for me, it's about making the choices that I feel cause the least harm possible, because living requires death and destruction of something, and we can't really get away from that. So, I feel that it's important for me to do the least harm possible that I can do. This is actually the definition of vegan. It's really not a diet. It's very interesting. It was coined in 1944 by Donald Watson and his wife, and I heard actually it was his wife that was more responsible than he was, but it was 1944, right? So all the guys get all the credit. And they were vegetarians, and they didn't like what they saw in the dairy and egg industries, exploiting the animals, and they're all slaughtered and still are. So they came up with this way of living. And again, it's as far as is possible and practicable, because it's impossible to do it 100% in our world. And it's really for any kind of exploiting. And animals is like in the broadest sense. Fish, fowl, what else is there? Sea creatures, lots of sea animals. It's really expanded to include to our benefit and to the benefit of the environment. And I would actually like to see it someday be just non-commodification of sentient beings, no matter what your species is. I think that would be a nice way to go. And so in dietary terms, it means just eating a whole food plant-based diet as much as possible. So health, you got to establish the health, right? And again, there's a lot of science that does support this. And I have a handout for you afterwards that has a partial list of many of the health and nutrition organizations, the leading ones, that do support a vegan diet, as long as it's a healthy one, not Oreos and potato chips. Well, I like Oreos and potato chips too, but not for breakfast. So we need to be clear about why it's healthy. Maybe we have our other reasons, our spiritual reasons, we need to be clear about why it's healthy. And here's a pretty powerful comment from Dr. Colin Campbell, who wrote the China study. And it's called one of the most rigorous epidemiological studies ever done. It took about 30 years. He has a book out. And so it's a pretty hefty piece of work. And he has said that for different reasons, and I have a few I'll present, it's very toxic to our bodies. And the more plant foods we replace, the healthier we're likely to be, as long as it's well planned and well organized. That's a big key, which is pretty much true for any diet. He compared it, this is a quote, that he felt that it was compared to cigarette smoking. And one of the reasons, this IGF-1, it's a hormone, it's an insulin-like growth factor, and it is known to promote cancer. And plant-based nutrition had suppressed cancer in test tubes. The interesting thing is that we have our DNA, and our DNA is not solid in stone, because healthy nutrition, healthy lifestyle can turn off and turn on genes or parts of genes that can either be destructive or healthy. So we cracked the genetic code like 2005 or 6. And found interesting that there's a lot of pieces of DNA that don't seem to be doing anything. Who knows? Maybe that's part of our evolution. That's kind of what I think. We're a fairly young species. And for the most part, humanity is kind of acting like a bunch of spoiled brats, really. Just destroying the planet, me, my, So here we go. So this is a little bit of IGF-1 research, and it was done in a Petri dish, and the cells flourished. And when IGF-1 was put in there with the cells, they grew and grew and grew. And children, it's an important growth factor. It's not that it's bad, but in children we need it, but in adults it can cause genetic mutations that lead to cancer. Another thing is that there's anabolic, which is the same thing, it's cell growth formula. And one of the key things is that it inhibits a process called apoptosis, whereas if a cell is no longer needed or if it's damaged, it self-destructs. It's kind of nature's way of getting rid of things that our body, can harm. And IGF-1 inhibits that cell destruction. So epidemiological means big studies done over lots of people and seeing the overall results of a lot of people. It may not say why. It may not get down to the physiology of why, but it does show trends that can suggest this or suggest that. And there are cancer risks. One thing we do see, we have a society that eats a lot of meat, a lot of animal products, a lot of dairy, a lot of butter, and too much. You know, it's very possible and very likely that our bodies can handle a little bit, you know, maybe a few ounces a few times a week. That's a lot more than most people are used to. So it strongly influenced, the IGF is also strongly influenced by our nutritional energy, with how much we eat or how little we eat, and the macronutrient balance of fat, carbs, and protein, and physical activity. And I have a list of actually of all the sources that I'm going to email Daniel. He can send it out to you and see all the sources. And this is a comment that I hear a lot, you know, but we've been, you know, eating meat for thousands and thousands of years. Yeah, we're a couple 100,000 years old, right? And we've been doing a lot of things for the couple 100,000 years that are not so nice. And so what I have here, a couple of videos. Let me see if I can get, oops. I'm gonna have to go to this screen and slideshow. There we go. A couple of quick YouTube. We're not going to see the whole YouTube. Can you see that here? Okay. So this is Dr. Sofia Pinata Ochoa. She works at the University of California, Los Angeles in their integrative health and medicine department.
Hi, this is Dr. Sofia Pineda Ochoa with Meet Your Future. Are humans herbivores, carnivores, or omnivores? It's very important for a given animal to eat what they are physiologically and anatomically designed to eat to improve the chances of survival and health. So what are humans designed to eat? When looking at a species to determine what they are in terms of carnivore, omnivore, or herbivore, we can look at their behavior or we can look at their biology. From a behavioral standpoint, humans behave as omnivores because we observe many humans in their behavior eating a wide variety of both animal and plant-based foods. Biologically, however, from a physiologic and anatomic standpoint, it's a different story. Dr. William C. Roberts from the National Institutes of Health and Baylor University, who is the editor-in-chief of the American Journal of Cardiology and one of the most prominent cardiologists in the world, with over 1,500 publications in peer-reviewed medical journals, summarized our answer very nicely. He wrote, "Although most of us conduct our lives as omnivores, in that we eat flesh as well as vegetables and fruits, human beings have characteristics of herbivores, not carnivores. The appendages of carnivores are claws. Those of herbivores are hands or hooves. The teeth of carnivores are sharp. Those of herbivores are mainly flat for grinding. The intestinal tract of carnivores is short, 3 times body length. That of herbivores is long, 12 times body length. Body cooling of carnivores is done by panting, herbivores by sweating. Carnivores drink fluids by lapping, herbivores by sipping. Carnivores produce their own vitamin C, whereas herbivores obtain it from their diet. Thus, humans have characteristics of herbivores, not carnivores."
Okay, that's interesting. And another one here from Dr. Milton Mills, quite a brilliant nutrition expert, physician, and nutrition.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Nancy, and today I'm going to help explain why everyone seems to be so obsessed.
Referred to as the scary disease du jour meaning of the day. And that's whatever they're highlighting on the evening news, be it SARS, hantavirus, bird flu, cockroaches at the local deli. I mean, whatever they're talking about today to try to scare the bejesus out of people. Well, even with this issue of terrorism, which is obviously a very serious issue and that is affecting the world, the fact of the matter is that the worst terrorists here in America are a little girl with pigtails, a clown, a chihuahua, and a guy dressed up like a king, if you know what I'm talking about. Burger King, Wendy's, McDonald's, and Taco Bell have been responsible for killing more human beings than any other source, including all the wars that have ever been fought in the history of this country. But I digress. Well, I submit to you that if that previous list is where our concerns are with respect to our health, our priorities are misplaced, just like the lady in this slide. Now, the sign says, "Do not feed the animals." Her husband is being eaten by a crocodile, and she says, "You're embarrassing me, Warren." Clearly, her priorities are somewhat misplaced. The actual leading causes of death in America and other Western countries are cardiovascular diseases, cancers, stroke, auto accidents, diabetes, and obesity, just to kind of give you sort of the top few. This is important because experts estimate that up to 80% of the major diseases and premature death we see in this country could be prevented by changes in diet and lifestyle. That's a tremendous, tremendous statistic. Every year, over 500,000 people die from heart disease, another 500,000 die from cancers, and the toll from obesity, diabetes, and stroke, etc., again, is astronomical. And to think that we could not only prevent 80% of those deaths, but we could also prevent people from suffering from the diseases in the first place is a very profound point. And
Okay, we'll go on back to here. I have to go back to, there we go. So, paleo, that's a big popular diet too, and it's very meat-based. And the question I have about that, aside from the science, is why would we take nutritional advice from people who basically grunted to communicate, didn't live past 25 or 30, and knew nothing about nutrition? People try to glamorize eating meat. And you've seen, sometimes I see ads and I can see they're trying to sexualize eating meat. And, you know, we're top of the food chain. And I say, the only food chain we're in are supermarkets. I mean, really. So, you know, we're just a few snippets of DNA away from being chimpanzees. And I've heard it said that maybe even orangutans are closer. So, you know, nobody really wants to look like a monkey, but sometimes people will use the example of like, well, lions, you know, well, lions, some animals eat other animals, and they'll say, like, lions, and I'll say, well, why are you using lions when we're nothing like them? And as Dr. Ocho explained, you know, we have the anatomy of herbivores. And I really think people want to identify with a beast that's glamorous, right? King of the jungle. They're beautiful, gorgeous creatures, incredible, rather than, you know, act like a monkey. So, you know, we were often hunted too back then. And notice the animals that have been domesticated for food are plant eaters. They're probably because it's a one-way street. Only they're going to end up dinner, not us, right? Carnivorous animals would probably be much harder to domesticate and control. So, and they probably ate animals that were already dead. It's not really that easy, and for a species that needs to eat a few times a day and get, you know, calories throughout the day, it's kind of hard to depend on a food source that wants to run away from you or run towards you, and then you run away from them. So now this is an interesting one about protein. I hear this question a lot. Where do you get your protein? And the thing about protein, it's in everything, and there's plenty among the plant foods, and we can go into that a little bit more. But this is a very interesting comparison here, because it's not the protein, but it's the other things that come in with the beans and the meats, right? The beans have much fewer calories. There's no, there is some fat in beans, but it's very low and it's not saturated fat. And there's no cholesterol. Plants have sterols, but they're not the cholesterols that kind of can clog your arteries. There's fiber, all fiber in beans, a great source of fiber, and there's none in meat. And there's iron, there's a certain amount of iron. I want to emphasize that plant-based iron is called non-heme. and it needs some vitamin C for better absorption. Where animal-based iron is heme iron, it goes right into your blood. And that may sound like a really good thing, but it's too easy to get too much iron. It's one of those minerals that you really want to have in check. So heme iron can be, non-heme, I'm sorry, it can be regulated by your body. There's different receptors in the intestines to absorb the heme iron. And it's pretty easy to get vitamin C if you're eating a lot of plant-based foods. So this is about 3.5 ounces of beef, and this is just to compare the other things that come in. This is a bodybuilder who passed away, and he was vegan. Jim Morris, anybody hear of him? Yeah, I hadn't until I put this together, actually. He was a former Mr. America, Mr. USA, Mr. Universe, and he got a lot of muscles. Now, probably he had to take some supplements and maybe some drugs to get that big. Because bodybuilders, I used to work as an art director at Muscle and Fitness magazine, and they take drugs and supplements. You really can't physically get quite that big. Although after years of training and super, super clean diet, most of those guys to look that way can't eat a lot of the things that we really enjoy eating because they have to be so strict about what they eat. So this is the handout that I have for you at the end. And really, I mean, every major, because I've looked and looked for many of them, they do have unequivocal support and have an official statement about the superior health benefits of eating a plant-based diet. And in some of them, the eatright.org is from the American, from the American Dietetic Association, and they call vegan total vegetarian. So sometimes you'll see that it'll be called vegetarian or vegetarian and vegan, but vegan is actually considered to be total vegetarian. So I thought that was an interesting. And I call myself a vegan omnivore. I'll eat anything, a little bit too much of things I maybe shouldn't, but nothing really bothers me. I know some people have different food restrictions, but I have none. I'm kind of glad about that. And this is the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics. So this is their statement. I've broken it up with some other images that might help. They're nutritionally adequate, which is a good statement. It's not like, oh, it's just okay. Adequate means it fulfills all of the nutritional requirements that you have. As long as it's well planned, which is true for any diet, and it helps to prevent and treat certain diseases. It's great for mitigating problems that some people have. It's been proven many times to actually reverse heart disease. A whole food plant-based diet has been able to reverse heart disease in many, many people, and diabetes as well. It's appropriate for every stage of life. Pregnancy, lactation, old age, athletes, everybody can benefit from it. And basically they all say that vegans are reduced risk of these diseases that Dr. Mills was explaining, which you're probably familiar with. An interesting comment, he said we've lost more people to diseases of lifestyle than all the wars that were fought. And you think about it, it's a few hundred people, 1,000 people a year that either or die or become very sick from lifestyle diseases. And it's not the only thing, but it's a great contributor. I'm not going to go click on each one of these. You will have in the handout that I can email to you. But a lot of athletes, if you go into a Google search, you'll see vegan athletes, and a lot of athletes are becoming vegan with food because they report they have greater health, greater strength, greater endurance, greater recovery times. And these are people that have the greatest demands on their bodies, much more than we do. There's a documentary coming out very soon this fall called The Game Changers. It's directed by Louis Pathios. He directed the movie The Cove about dolphins, and executive produced by James Cameron, a hotshot director and producer in Hollywood. He did the movie Avatar. You're familiar with that? It's a story of a guy by the name of James Wilkes. He was a special forces trainer, and he won the Ultimate Fighter, and he traveled around the world in a quest for truth behind the world's most dangerous myth that meat is necessary for protein, strength, and optimal health. So it's supposed to be a pretty phenomenal documentary coming out. Really briefly, it's gut bacteria. Our gut is considered like a second brain. And our gut controls so much in our body. It's a lot of the immune products are made in our gut. It can affect our mood, it can affect our mental clarity, and it also importantly affects how nutrients are absorbed of the food that we eat. So you can be taking in a lot of perfect nutrition, but if your gut isn't healthy, you won't absorb it. And so it's not so much what you eat, but what you absorb, right? And there's also important in plant foods is there's soluble fiber. And I just will, for the record, say when I became vegan, my plumbing worked so good. Perfect. Never been better. So that's it's a nice feeling. And it's a good sign, it's a really good sign. So it impacts, like I said, our nutrient absorption. Low carbohydrate, I know that's kind of a fancy diet. People go, I want to lose weight of low carbs. They don't realize that carbohydrate, fat, and protein are actually nutrients. They're really not food groups. But we made them food groups for common cultural, trends. And when people say, oh, I'm eating a low-carb diet, the first thing I say is, well, what do you mean by a carbohydrate? So what do you mean by a carbohydrate? What do you think of a carbohydrate? Name a few. Bread, sugar, wheat, cake, pasta. Well, carbohydrate is actually a chemical compound, and all plant foods are carbohydrate-based. Everybody here has a salad, eats salad? Carrots scare anybody? Well, they're carbohydrate-based foods. And a low carbohydrate is dangerous because our body takes in carbohydrate and turns it into glucose in the blood and glucagon in the liver. And it's our body's preferred sense of fuel. And it's the only fuel for our brain. The only fuel for our brain is carbohydrate. We do have fat and some protein in our brain. The fat in our brain is actually what's the myelin sheath around the nerves, because our brain is just all a bunch of nerves. Somebody says you have a lot of nerves. You can say, thank you. I'm really smart. I got a lot of nerves. And but for the energy and the growth of the brain, we need carbohydrates. And bacteria are dependent upon what we feed them. So in our gut, healthy plant-based foods alter their environment to shut out the bad guys. We don't know, we've heard of an acid-acidic balance. I don't know a whole lot about it, but I do know that animal foods are very acidic. Some plant foods can be, but I don't think any are nearly as acidic as animal products. And one of the things that happens when you have a lot of acidic food, your body will leak calcium and other minerals from the bones to buffer your blood. So that's why sometimes you might even be taking in a good amount of calcium, but if your diet is highly acidic, you can still be losing bone mass. Meat, sugar, fat, white bread, and crap is in my notes. They don't work well and allows the bad guys to proliferate, lowering our immunity and impairing our gut function. B12 is not in any plant foods, although I did find some articles online that said it was in banana peels. And there are cultures, have you heard of a culture that eats banana peels? I never heard of that before, but you can go online and get some great recipes. I did it once. I chopped it up and cooked it up with my vegetables. It was kind of like tough eggplant. It's supposed to be very, very healthy, but I do take a B12 supplement, and we're going to cover a little bit in a few minutes about a little bit more about B12, but it's not inherent in animals. Remember, the animals that people eat are plant eaters. So if the animals need B12 too, where do they get it from? Well, animals eat off the ground, and the bacteria is supposed to be in the ground. We've industrialized our soil so much that it could have even been in the water, or you could do gardening and walking around and maybe get some that way, I don't know. But a deficiency can occur regardless of diet, and many doctors are testing people that are 50 and older now because it actually can be a common deficiency. Your body just isn't able to absorb or retain it. So about 2,500 micrograms a week of cyanocobalamin or methylcobalamin. One doctor, Dr. Greger of Nutrition, recommends, nutritionfacts.org recommends the cyanocobalamin, And Dr. Klaper recommends the methylcobalamin. Some people can't process the cyanocobalamin as well, so they need the methylcobalamin. I actually take one of each. So there's a mutation in the metabolic pathway that allows some people to only metabolize the non-methylcobalamin. So if there's no mutation, you can take cyano. And a blood test is the only reliable way, so I recommend anybody that is 50 and older, it's a good idea to get a blood test to make sure your levels are up. It's called an MMA test. If your B12 is normal, but the MMA is high, then you have the mutation and you need the methylcobalamin. So this is an interesting slide. There's a lot of text and I'm not going to go reading through every single line, but part of the thing that we don't realize is in today's animal agriculture, they have to give them a lot of drugs. You're taking animals and hoarding them all in one place, and diseases spread easily. And since they're products and there has to be an economical benefit and gain, you have to make sure that you get as many healthy products as possible in the system. And about 60 to 80% of all drugs are made for farmed animals. When you look at it from the numbers point of view, there's about 326 million people in the US, give or take a few. And let's say we'll eliminate the vegans and some vegetarians and people eating less. So we'll go with 300 million people eating animal products 3 times a day. That's all 900 million meals a day, close to 1 billion. So you can imagine all the animals that it requires that. So that's why factory farming has become about 95 to 99% of all animals now are raised in factory farms. They're pretty awful places. They need pesticides for flies, synthetic fertilizers. They're fed, the biggest crops are corn and soy that are fed to animals, and they are genetically modified. They're sprayed with pesticides, and so there's a lot of stuff in animal products that will never get to the label that would not really are very toxic to us. So I feel like, hey, I take a B12 supplement, I try to buy organic as much as possible, and maybe I have to take a supplement, but I'm avoiding all that other stuff that comes along with food that I really don't want to eat. And D3 has nothing to do as much with what we eat, but as where we live. We're really humans, we're really meant to live in temperate climates. Right? We're not too cold, not too hot. We control our climate temperature now to keep it at a nice, comfortable 72 degrees, something like that. So we are always out of our element. Other forms of growth stimulants, there's dewormers. Yuck. So these are 3 healthy plates. The one on the left is from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. I just attended their International Nutrition and Health Conference in Washington, D.C. They had about 1,000 health professionals there, a lot of doctors and nurses and different health professions. And it was really a very interesting, eye-opening conference. The middle one is Harvard University, and they've taken dairy out and replaced it with water. And the last one is the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture. If you notice, even the USDA plate is mostly vegan. It's like 3/4, and most of us don't really eat that way. Most of us just, we're just think of vegetables as a side dish, a little broccoli on the side. And again, there's dairy there. So these plates don't really look all that different. They have all the same kind of food groups. And in the USDA, the protein side, that's included plant-based sources of protein for a long time. They're viable. You don't have to do protein combining. That's a whole nother issue in itself. So there's no food group called carbohydrate. There's no food group called fat. But for some reason, there's a food group called protein. And it's very misleading because it's a nutrient. It's really not a food group. And people think that meat is the only pure source, but that's really not true. It's actually a secondary source. Like I said, those animals ate plants and got all the protein from plants. There are some proteins that our body makes from the proteins that we eat. And from those 20 amino acids, there's something like 10,000 different proteins in our body that do all kinds of things. So I can see as in anatomy and physiology knowledge grew, these people saw protein everywhere, so it was like protein, gotta have protein. But our body reuses things. So this is the nutrient breakdown. And one of the classes of nutrients are called phytonutrients. I'm assuming you probably heard of those. And there's thousands of antioxidants, phytochemicals that fight disease, only in plant foods. And those, unfortunately, you don't really get those from the animal products. Even though the animals have eaten the foods, you're not going to get those. Micronutrients are because they're in small amounts, and fiber, which is only in plants. So have you ever heard eat the rainbow? Eat the rainbow. These are all the different things that phytonutrients can do. An excellent book from Dr. Michael Greger of nutritionfacts.org is How Not to Die. And actually, this isn't his quote. I just saw him at this conference, and somebody else said it. I thought he did. He said he knows he's going to die. He just doesn't want it to be his fault. So beans are amazing sources. They're considered to be like a superfood. Tons of, lots of B vitamins, essential nutrients, and they're really cheap. And they last a long time. You can store them for months, maybe even years. And plant one bean, and you can grow a whole stalk of beans, right? So there's another thing, important thing about health, and then we're moving on to the other issues. There's a growing risk of disease. Somebody who I actually, consider a good source of information, I didn't follow up with the actual article, said there's something like 30 new drugs were approved for animals agriculture recently. And we know that the antibiotics has been causing problems. It's causing resistance, antibiotic resistance, even in kids. So the thing is, a lot of the health benefits are described as the things that we'll avoid, like it'll avoid heart disease and avoid this and avoid these horrible things. But that's only half the picture, because fear will push us away from something. So it's important to know that these things can do damage. But what is it that pulls us towards? What is it that keeps us going for years? And it's really the things that we find joy and pleasure in. So I feel like it's really important to enjoy food. So in making this lifestyle choice, I learned a lot of new recipes. I tried foods I had never tried before. And I was just amazed to find out all the things you can do with plant foods. It's where all the color and all the variety is and all the appetite appeal. Picture a little hamburger patty all by itself, and then picture it in a bun with lettuce, onion, and tomato, and ketchup, and French fries. So it's really the plant foods that make things that less interesting. So there's a lot of joy, and you feel good. When you're healthy, you feel good. And and this is probably the most spiritual part of the presentation, compassion. I also call it like a change of perspective. Right? And it's really important that we have science with ethics, because otherwise ethics can really be blinding. And science without ethics can be a weapon of mass destruction, is what we see, right? We see that happening in a lot of different ways in our world today. So they both need to work together. And compassion, it's when you hear the word compassion, it makes you feel good. Like, I want to be compassionate. Anybody in this room not want to be compassionate? I think it's a really important human quality. And it's not really an emotion per se, but it's connecting our head and our heart, getting them to work together, and thinking of others before ourselves. And when we lose this, I think it's such an important part of being human. Melanie Joy, Dr. Melanie Joy, has a website called Carnism. She used to teach philosophy in the U.S., and then she got married and moved to Germany with her husband, and does travels around the world quite a bit, helping different people in different communities. And I just love this quote that, empathy leads us to compassion, and it's really how the only way I think we can end violence in this world. Nobody really likes violence. Even though it may seem like part of the human condition, I think of wars the same way that you would think of like inner city violence. When we hear of inner city violence, we recognize that that is a failure of society. We don't just go, oh, well, you know, some people are just violent. I mean, it's like there's something wrong when people are killing each other. And this is the kind of world that we live in today. We live in a global community now. So I'm of the thought that, no, we don't have to accept the fact that people have to have wars. I don't think that we do. And at some point, we won't survive unless we get past that. So it's really a history, you know, humanity has such a history, I think, of violence and oppression. And it's time for us to grow up. Like little kids, you know, little kids, they'll hit each other. You wouldn't take a gun and put it in the hand of a 2-year-old, right? Because they would probably shoot somebody, maybe shoot you. But, you know, and we've had guns in the hands of 2-year-olds in our, you know, throughout our history. And this is the end of the quote, and an entire society of rational and caring people could somehow check our hearts and minds at the door to enable a global atrocity that's caused more bloodshed, wars, and this is really the things that have been done to animals. One of the things that actually switched me on or turned me around was I saw some undercover videos of animal agriculture. And I followed through and did a lot. I'm not going to show you one. Don't worry. I did a lot of research, and I thought, you know, our food system doesn't really care about us. Large part of it doesn't really care about people. So what chance would the animals have of being treated kindly? And then I realized, and when anything is done in massive amounts, you know, you lose the quality control. So all of these things kind of came together for me at once, and I made the choice to do what I'm doing now. So veganism is a massively growing trend, even though animal products dominate. I think we're seeing it more and more places, and I don't always get it, the weird looks. I tell people I'm vegan, they don't look at me like, ah. They say, oh, and people start asking about it and ask questions, and I think that's great. But these are some of the consequences of turning sentient beings into commodities. And this was something that hit me about 2 months after I decided to go vegan with food. I just realized, like, it's not so much about treatment, because if there's bad treatment, people will say, well, let's do it better. Let's be nicer to them. You know, can you be? And even if we were to raise, you know, animals in these wonderful bucolic environments that everyone would love to see, they still have to be sent through the same slaughterhouses. And there's the issue of taking those lives and what, you know, the implication of taking a life that we don't need to take. And that also we'll see some of the other impacts. These are some pictures of farming. They're honest pictures. Some of them might be a little disturbing, so I just wanted to warn you, but I tried to pick the best that were honest, that weren't too unsettling. But these are the things that these animals, this is their lives. This is their whole life. And these are all common practices. There's not many laws in animal agriculture. The law is what's ever commonly practiced is okay. And there are some slaughter laws, but they're very hard to manage because their animals are killed so quickly. There's a pig slaughterhouse in North Carolina. They kill 10,000 pigs a day. You got almost 1 billion people eating it 3 times a week in the country alone, so it's the only way to do it. These are chickens. I really never met a chicken before. I didn't know much about them, and then I started looking them up because I used to eat them. I would pick a chicken leg up and just chomp away at it and not even think anything of it. But if I were driving and I saw a human leg on the side of the road, I would be horrified, right? Because I think, oh my God, what horrible thing happened? This person's leg is on the side of the road. And then I would pick up a chicken leg and not even think anything of it, you know. And of course, I don't do that anymore. But these are just some numbers, and numbers aren't really that inspiring, but I think they're important to see like why it gets so bad for them. And this is a free range. This can be called free range. A lot of people want like cage-free eggs, but it's not really much better for them. They're on the floor among their own excrement 24/7. They have something like twice the mortality rate. There's a certain amount of animals that will just die in these systems. And this is caged, and it's pretty awful too. And they just never really get to be chickens. And the broilers are the chickens that people eat. It's a whole different breed than the hen laying eggs. And I don't know if you're aware that they've been bred through breeding and hormones and practices. They blow them up in about 6 weeks. And their bones crack, and they get heart attacks, and they get all kinds of awful conditions. And they're living, in these warehouses that they don't have toilets. Let's just put it that way. Now, this is dairy. A lot of people go vegetarian because they don't want to see animals get slaughtered, but in fact, in all dairy and all egg animals are all slaughtered fairly young after they're used, after they're forced to reproduce and produce many more times than they naturally would. And many dairy cows are sent to slaughter pregnant. They get the rennet from the calf's stomach. Cows are very emotional creatures. You can just go look up on the upper right if the bottom pictures. Yeah, just go look on the upper right. They're very social creatures. They have their own unique intelligence. The mothers will help each other with their babies. And in dairy, I didn't know this until a few years ago, that the babies are taken away shortly after birth because humans want their milk. Now, if you went to your doctor and you asked a doctor that you trusted for nutritional advice, and this doctor said to you, you should start breastfeeding, what would you think of that doctor? But yet dairy is been, well, that's normal. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that if we really needed milk, which is baby food, wouldn't we need it from our own species? And wouldn't we be naturally breastfeeding for our life? So it was really like that movie, what was that movie that, take the blue pill or the red pill, what was that? The Matrix, yeah. When I felt like I'd been taking the red pill, and all of a sudden I took the blue pill and just saw things completely differently. And it's like, my God, and it's so normalized and ubiquitous. But the good news is, plant milks have really been growing. There's some amazing vegan cheeses out now, and the products are getting better and better and more accessible. So dairy cows last about 4 to 7 years, and then they're sent to slaughter, and they end up in Burger King or McDonald's. Sorry about that. Yeah, this was the example I gave, of they're commodified. All of a sudden, that animal's body is like a piece of meat, instead of realizing this was a living being. So, Aspca Facts. Even the Aspca, actually, the Association for Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, on their website, they actually have a little statement at the end of this section that says, if you really want to, help animals, eat a plant-based diet as much as you can. So veal calves are byproducts. Babies taken away and put into these sheds. There's farms with thousands of these sheds alone, isolated for a few months, and then they're killed for veal. And the dairy industry will say, well, we do that because they have weak immune systems. We don't want to, I don't believe it. Because on beef farms, they don't take the babies away. In beef farms, the calves get to nurse and live with their mother. So it's no coincidence that we just happen to take the milk that was really meant for them. And there's turkeys. That's a free-range turkey farm. How many? A few 100 million killed for Thanksgiving. Group housing, disproportionately breast heavy. I've seen this turkey that looked like this on an animal sanctuary, and it's kind of hard for them to walk around, difficulty walking and breathing. And they've just been bred by us. And this is very common practice for pigs. This is how mother sows are kept in here for months at a time. They can't turn around, they go insane, and they claim that it prevents the mother from rolling over on the babies, but that doesn't happen. The mother can't move. And normally in a natural life, a mother would build a nest, straw. They're really smart creatures. They're supposed to be smarter than 3-year-olds. And at least as smart as dogs. And they look so funny. It's such a joke that nature played on us to make an animal that actually anatomically is very, very similar to us, but they just look so weird and funny, But they're really not wild pigs. I wouldn't recommend trying to pet a wild pig because they can be nasty. But these pigs, you know, the ones that I've seen on farms and when they're allowed to interact with humans, they can be pretty amazing little creatures. This was just the end of some farming facts, and you know, doesn't that look nice? That's how, if I had kids, I'd want to raise them to respect animals and love animals. And the children actually that do learn to love and care for animals become much more compassionate adults. And adults that lose empathy and kill others and hurt others, the common trait is that they lose empathy. They've lost the ability to empathize and have compassion. And they were probably abused too when they were growing up. So this is just some of the few additional facts of what happens to some of the animals. These are common practices. Little chicks, both in the chicken and egg industry, half their beak are seared off with a hot blade. Male chicks in the egg industry are ground up alive or suffocated in bags because they're considered useless, or they're turned into maybe cat food or fertilizer. And then we have fish. And there's some interesting books and research that's been done on fish that show that they are capable of feeling. They are social creatures. Some of them can even recognize people. But, and we know some of the other advanced creatures like dolphins and whales are extremely intelligent. They have families and they nurse their young. They have a memory, a sense of time. They can play and they can feel fear, much in the same way as animals. A lot of the shrimp now is farmed. About half the seafood is farmed now. And by 2048, you can type it into a Google search. By 2048, the oceans might be fishless at our current rate. And fish are the ecosystem. Big fish eat little fish eat plankton. And we don't realize when we go into nature and upset the balance by taking animals or taking fish out of the oceans, we're totally disrupting the ecosystem. And farmed fish is not really an ethical answer. It's not an environmentally friendly answer. And the same problems that you have in, when you have animals together, you got to give them drugs. Something like 5 to 10 of the catch in the oceans is bycatch. And you've probably heard stories of like turtles getting caught in nets, and a lot of illegal fishing. What they'll do is they'll take these nets that can be a mile long, and they'll just dump them in the ocean when they're done because they don't want to be caught. So bycatch is a big problem. It's unintended catch. The estimates are difficult to get a totally exact estimate, but it persists despite conservation because there's a lot of illegal fishing, and all of these other creatures get injured. And you ever seen the video that's passing around online about the turtle with the straw stuck up in his nose? So now everybody's like, no straws, no straws, no straws. That's good. It'll help. It'll help. Now these are some rationalizations that I've come across a lot, and I can shoot down the best of them on any given day. So you're welcome to ask me any of these questions. But so the one thing, like, well, it's just one bad day. And I say, no, it's more than just one bad day, the day they're killed. It's all the rest of the days of their life that they could have had are being taken away. Having a bad day is like, I have a bad hair day, or I had a flat tire, that's having a bad day. Circle of life. Not with what we're doing in the world today, They're born to be eaten. That's another interesting one that really gets my goat, pardon the expression. But I'm thinking, no, that's a projection that we've put onto them by calling them food. And in order to do that, we have to deny their sentience, deny their right to their own life, to their autonomy as individuals, because they are. And I feel like it really dumbs us down. It dumbs us down intellectually, spiritually, ecologically, So that's why a lot of these reasons I think are fueling a lot of people wanting to eat better, eat more vegan food. And I won't buy anything anymore that's leather, because I learned about the leather industry. It's a whole industry in itself. Some animals are skinned alive. It's pretty bad. And now fur, there's some states that are actually banning the sale of fur because of all the cruelty that's involved, and nobody really needs to wear a fur coat, you know, let's face it. And some people say, well, some life is better than none. Well, yeah, I suppose that's true, but why would you take that life away from somebody? You know, it's very easy to rationalize killing when the knife isn't at our throat, right? And why would you say that? They're stunned before they're killed. That's nice. But stunning is not that easy. It's a very, very precise measure, and sometimes it doesn't work, and sometimes the lines are just too fast. They just don't have time to do it. Or sometimes the animals are stunned, and then by the time they get strung up to be killed, they regain consciousness. It's pretty bad. Here's a really, actually I'm going to go to the next page because it's getting late. This is a awesome documentary. I'm going to do the first 2 minutes of it for you. And you can, this is free online. Get it.
Scientists know that cardiovascular disease starts with progressive damage.
There we go.
I think the most important message that I have is to remember that you, and I'm speaking to you watching this film, you make a difference. You as an individual make a difference. What you do each day actually is affecting what's going on in the world each day. So your life matters, you matter, and use your life wisely. Fast forward a little bit.
Finanziell können wir es uns leisten, gesundheitlich können wir es uns eh nicht leisten.
Despite all warnings, we are eating more and more meat. There is no day without meat, no feast without meat, no break without meat. It's a normal part of our diets because it's tradition, it's cheap, and because it tastes good.
My diet for 65 years was the SAD diet, the standard American diet. I ate meat and chicken and fish and fowl and lots of butter and anything that tasted good.
In 2010, at the age of 66, Sharon Kintz started to think about her eating habits as the result of a dramatic event.
At that time, I already had been diagnosed with high blood pressure, so I was aware of that. But having a heart attack was a complete surprise to me.
So, kind of running out of time. So basically she adopted a plant-based diet and had a lot of success with it. But it's really a tremendous film, and I strongly suggest anybody, I strongly recommend seeing it to anybody. Oops. How much time do I have? Am I done? A couple minutes, okay. Love this quote by Maya Angelou. Have you seen that quote before? This is what I was talking to some people say, well, we've been eating, animals for thousands of years, but maybe we didn't really know any better, And now we have global industries that are also very tied into the pharmaceutical industry, as you saw. And the meat and pharmaceutical industries have very big lobbies in the government. So the fact that the USDA even has that plate, that's 75% plant-based, I think is pretty phenomenal. And we know, things like the oil companies or big, powerful oil companies, and they know what they're doing is wrong, but they don't stop, So it's really up to us. So these are some of the big detrimental impacts on animal agriculture and factory farms. And what do you notice anything remarkable about the picture on the right? It's a typical farm. Anything that's like, he's got a mask on because he can't breathe the air got thousands, sometimes there's 30, 40,000 birds in one warehouse. That's for eggs. That's free range, cage-free eggs. Cage-free eggs. Sounds nice. I used to organic cage-free eggs, and I thought I was doing something really nice until I learned more about it. This is a powerful statement, and I've seen these similar statements coming from many different places, and it's just overwhelming to see the extensive damage caused by these industries. You can do more Google searches and you can see that too. The UN News Center, the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organization in 2006, I think, or 9, published a report called Livestock's Long Shadow. And since then, it's been really widely known about the damage they cause. Now, I know there is this guy, Alan Savory, who has applied normal livestock knowledge of how they work on the land and saying, well, actually, we need more cows. But the research that's been done to test his hypothesis has never been able to prove it because we're doing it in the massive numbers and it doesn't work like he hopes that it would. And those animals still have to be slaughtered, which aside from the awful reality of it is very, very resource intensive. The water usage of all these animals from cows down to pigs and chickens never accounts for the water that's in the slaughter process, which there's cleanup and scalding tanks. And I don't even know if that could be assessed, honestly. So our world, the biodiversity of our planet, one of the biggest threats, in addition to all of the wasteful other practices that we have, is animal agriculture. And it's my belief that with all of the other environmental things we do, if we continue like this without curbing it way back, or in the best case scenario ending it, we won't be able to save our environment. I don't think that we will. These are just some resources from general. 56% of the fresh water, at least in the US, goes for animal agriculture. And now we're seeing all the dry spells we're having, the fires in California, and we really can't afford to lose that kind of water. This was surprising to me that more crops are grown to feed animals than people. Just think of the numbers. There's 326 million of us, but there's 10 billion land animals, 9 or 10 billion every year. And they're fed all kinds of stuff that we went through before. So we got 9 billion predicted in 2050. And there would be enough if 40% of all animal feed crops were used directly for human consumption. A vegan can live off of 1/6 of an acre in a year, and an omnivore takes about 2.5 acres. Another great website that also gives some practical tips called Take Extinction Off Your Plate. And this looked like a really good site to me. I went on it and I looked around and poked around a lot and looked at the stuff that they did. But there's wild animals. One thing this is the wildlife section. People don't realize that millions of wildlife are killed every year by the U.S. Wildlife Service to make way for ranching and animal farming because they consider them getting in the way. They're grinding up a lot of wild horses, coyotes, grazing. Native species are frequently killed to protect meat production profits. Grass-eating species such as elk and deer are killed en masse to reserve more feed for cattle. And that's not the, and another quote by Maya Angelou. So sometimes it takes courage to change, you know, it does, especially when you're the odd one out, you know. And, but it's all the oddballs that have really helped shape our evolution as humanity, right? Think of the women in the early 1900s that were arrested because they wanted the right to vote. They were thrown in jail. Well, people just like us, you know, but that was just not the cultural norm at the time. So she was pretty incredible. And this is another word I learned, and then we're done. Last slide. It's a really beautiful word. It means nonviolence. And some products are unavoidable. I didn't know there's animal parts in the computers and my cell phones and my car tires. It's like, everywhere. You know? So I just do my best. Perfect is the enemy of good, and just want to make the best choices I can. And not to do nothing because we can't do everything. You know, it can be overwhelming at first, but that's the end. Actually, I could keep this.
Thank you, dear Nancy.
Should I keep it up?
You can keep it up there. That's fine. That's fine. You can keep it up there.
Oh,
actually,
stay here.
You
I'm gonna have a seat. Okay.
Just want to go back to one quick slide. If this thing ever works. No, you're good. I want to just go back to one very interesting slide that you brought at the beginning. That is this one right here. I would like to, before we pass the word to comments and questions about all of this, it's a lot of information that we receive and very important information that we can all digest. And I thank you for offering the slides as well, so we can actually share with one another and we can go deeper into these websites. I think it's very prudent for us to go and study, right, more, to align ourselves with these teachings and practice. Nothing, you know, should be taken, you know, in one ear and let go on the other ear. Daniel, can you grab a bottle of water for her? And one of the couple of things that I would like to do is to kind of connect this a little bit to our one of our realities, because, you know, we live many realities. Each one of us have our own lives. You know, the way we see things and the way we perceive things is, you know, what we learn from Spiritism. One of the cases where Spiritism brings to us on how important it is the idea of nutrition, the idea of how we behave, and it is connected to this right here. We are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. In the book, Nosolar, chapter 9, and I believe, I say this for myself, I believe is one of the chapters that are completely overlooked of this book. I did for many years until I came across several times. And then I said, oh, this is amazing. I'm not going to say that I'm perfect at it, but it's entitled The Problem of Nutrition. When Andrea Louise and Lucia is actually studying how nutrition was actually done or perceived in Nosolar. And to our amazement, yes, I'll get there. To our amazement, they had problems. Nosolar, for those who does not know about this colony, it's a spiritual colony, which is depicted by the spirit Andrea Louise through the hands of the medium Chico Xavier. So, in other words, this spirit who lived in, or perhaps still lives there, is one of the representatives of this location that after he passed, excuse me, he left the physical body, he went to this colony being helped by others. And when he gets there, he learns about this new reality, the reality of being a spiritual being. And in this chapter, it is explained on how they behave towards food. The chapter starts about a question, and I'll read this real quick. He says, anyone observing this immense beehive of service, which was what he was seeing in Ocelar, he says, I remarked, might be led to inquire about several problems. What about provisions? I haven't noticed a ministry of economy. If we go back to the beginning of the book, there is no ministry of economy. In any organized society nowadays, we have what? Economists. We have a ministry of money, how we manage our money. And the whole conversation starts with that. Much like she brought to us, that how this affects our economy as well. Definitely affects our economy on how we eat, how we, how we're buying the things that are being thrown at us, right? So just to fast forward a little bit, the Lizzie is actually this helper of Naslar explains to André Luis that they had problems with nutrition. For many, many years, the governor of this spiritual colony had to start a new diet, propose a new diet to people coming back from the physical body to the spiritual reality. And guess what? It didn't change. People, or actually the spirits discarnating, they fought for it. They fought for the same type of food, of nutrition, heavy nutrition that they were having in the physical body. For 21 years, they fought back the governor. The governor, much like she did here tonight, kept explaining, kept actually helping individuals to spirit to go to higher colonies to show them the necessity of the change, on the products of the changes as well, because it's important for us to now learn these things and see where would this bring us as an individual, as a society as well. So over 20 years that took place in Ocelar. Until then, they gave away the heavy nutrition that they have. Now, bringing back this to Earth, this is what we're trying to promote, right? Balance. We're not here saying that any one of us, including myself, I'm saying this, that we are going home now and we're going to change, right? We can't, because our body will be debilitated. But we're trying to invite everyone to make small changes. Small changes. I have heard from many individuals, I tried this once, I'm going to stop eating meat tomorrow. Guess what? You will get sick. So little by little, cut the extras, the portions, thank you, and then make those changes. Chico Xavier, the nobleman who received these words, didn't change. He ate meat. Didn't change. So what are we saying here? Oh, it goes contrary to what we learn in Spiritism? No, it was his choice. It was his choice to continue to eat meat, but in the quantity that he needed, because he was a very humble man. He was someone who truly respect this other realm as well. One of the things that I would like to also mention to you, in question 723 of the Spirits book, the question is posed to the spirits. Is humankind's use of animals as food contrary to natural law? And the spirit says wisely, with your present physical condition, flesh nourishes flesh. Otherwise, humans perish. The law of self-preservation imposes on you the duty to preserve your energies and health so that you may fulfill the laws of labor. You should therefore eat according to the requirements of your own physical organization. What are we trying to say here? Are we changing anything? Are we saying you have to do this or that? No, it's to educate ourselves. It's to look at ourselves with the much science that we received here and say, enough is enough. We don't need this anymore. We don't need the quantity, and we need this, some of the things that we saw in the pictures. We thank you for that, to show this reality as well, to say we need to make better choices. We're trying to connect with the spiritual because it has to do not only with the environment, with the economy, with the being humble to the animals as well, but it's spirituality, our true nature, us spiritual beings. Because when we go back, and André Luis says this at the beginning of the book, we don't want to go back more debilitated than when we came here. And this is one of the ways that we lose quite a bit, because we abuse our resources, we abuse of the abuse on the physical body that we put in. We mentioned last week that perhaps we have this ability to reincarnate in this physical body and say, okay, you will have more or less 75, 90 years, whatever it is. Some of us maybe get like an extra 5 because we treat our bodies well. But most of the time we do what? We reduce the number of years that we will have in the physical body because we abuse our resources. We abuse this beautiful house that God gave us, eating, applying ourselves in a different way that we shouldn't be. So this is the idea. It's not to say anything to anybody that please change this or do this way, which obviously is not what she's saying, but to invite us to change, small changes. Challenge one another in a good way, not to throw in anybody's face. I didn't eat meat for 1 week. But challenge one another. What have you been eating? What about that salad? Have you tried this new diet? Have you tried this new, let's not talk about diet, because diet is something really kind of hard. But have you tried a new recipe, right? I tried this, it tastes great, right? Putting away all the craziness that we have out there. And really pay attention to what is being thrown in us. Because commercials, is great, to really, when you pass by the McDonald's, when you pass by this and that. So be careful, look at the menu a little bit further to say, maybe I'll leave the meat today. I'll try something else. So that's the invitation for all of us. We would like to open up for questions. If you would like to get up and stretch, it's okay as well. I know we have been sitting for quite a bit. It's all right, to get up and stretch. And we will open up for some questions and some comments that you may have so she can answer. Like she said, if she doesn't know the answer, she won't answer. Exactly. But thank you so much. As they were stretching, exactly up, right? We thank you for all the research that you did, because this is one of the things that we wanted to bring from the book Nosso Lar that we mentioned, that the governor actually wisely did, was to bring the teachings and tell those individuals who were fighting to say, look, this is the progress that we're aiming for, right? And it's not going to change overnight. And he knew that as a wise individual who, much like you, when you made your change, didn't expect to see drastic changes. And sometimes there are individuals that drastically stop, smoking, and they overnight, make that 360 change, or 180, like Daniel likes to remind me. Not 360, go back to the same place. So it's important for us to remind that little by little, right? Questions, comments? Yasko, please.
Thank you very much for all the data. I always say I'm 70% vegetarian, not vegan, because 100% is always difficult. We always fail if we put too high bars. But I was wondering that most of us, as we get older, we get wiser. So most of the data on vegan or vegetarianism is based on that age group above 40s, 60s, when usually we already raised our kids, the majority. So I wonder, although you put it there, how much data, scientific, really epidemiological data you have on babies, kids, young kids raised in this vegetarian, vegan diet. Very few families that I know, at least famous Gisele Bündchen and Tom Brady, are probably the ones that we know. They raise their kids in almost vegan, I think. But I don't think we have too much data on this. So how does the scientific base thinking that kids have, different developmental rate in cells, brain, connectivity, etc.?
One of the slides I have is, and a handout, is from the leading health organizations, and one of them is a premier one in the US, and they say specifically it is healthy for every stage of life. I know that there's challenges because our culture is very, meat oriented, but the people that want to make the change, they do it. So the biggest stumbling block is our internal why. And so when you really get clear in that why, you do it. And think about other things you've accomplished. I'm sure everyone in this room has accomplished some things. Maybe you got a degree, maybe, kids, you have all the accomplishments that you had, you just made that decision, you wanted to do it, and you understood why, you just went ahead and you just did it. And we make a choice, and we can choose. You can go into a grocery store, the first thing you see are the produce section. You can just make those choices. And it's like exercising a muscle. At first it might seem kind of weak. When you first go to the gym and you exercise, you haven't done it a long time, the next day you might be sore. Like he was saying, sometimes when people stop eating meat, if you've been eating a lot of it and you stop all of a sudden, that can lead to failure. Some people do get sick, but there's a couple of reasons for that, and they just wait it out and then they feel better. Quickly, there's certain substances, couple substances that are in meat and not in plants, because you're eating the flesh of an animal, that the body will make on its own, but because you're getting it from the animal meat, your body doesn't make it. So offhand, I can't remember. Anyway, having a Alzheimer's moment here. Can't remember the name of it. So when you're, either, transitioning or taking some supplements for a little while, and then your body starts making those things and you feel better. But everyone's different. I've heard some people that they said they tried vegan for a while and then they weren't feeling good and they went back, and I think, well, maybe you just decided to stop and maybe you didn't have that internal conviction, which is something that I felt. Yeah, because I'll tell you, it was 2 months into being vegan and I had a moment of an epiphany. And I remember I was in my apartment and it just hit me. I was like, my God, it's unethical to turn sentient beings into commodities. And it was just so clear. And it just covered like everything, So I understand that there are some cultures and there are some ways that people have eaten animals in the past that doesn't have the brutality that we have here. But there's just too many people to do that now. And because, there's a ton of science, and that's why I have those, and I'll send you the links, and I have the handout, and you can go to the sites yourself, and they've done a lot of research on that, and they all have their official statements about, that it is nutritionally adequate, but you just have to do a little carefully, because I think the hardest thing is that we live in a world and a society that never really learned how to eat, that we're not generally, I've been eating, healthy most of my life, and I'm used to fending off most of the stuff that I see that's thrown at me. Like I go into a supermarket, most of the stuff in there I'm not going to buy, and I'm just used to that now. It doesn't tempt me, But I can see if you're used to, indulging in a lot of the packaged foods and all of these things that are easily available, it can feel like a real effort and it's like so much trouble. But once I get that really deep conviction and an understanding, then it became easy for me, Does that help? Yeah, and you'll have the handout and you can go back to those.
I have it over here. Anyone else has a question? Kirsten.
Thank you so much for the talk. What are your recommendations for someone who wants to sort of transition into vegetarianism or veganism? What recommendations or tips would you give to them to start out with?
That's a great question. I would say start making your meals plant-based. Get some recipes. On my website, I have a page of starter guides. Get a starter guide, get some books, learn and learn and learn. And you eat the foods that you're used to, and then look at your plate. Am I having like half my plate produce, like vegetables and fruits, and build your plate. And then if you still really feel like you've got to have that meat or that fish, add that in last instead of first. You know what I mean? Make that the side dish. I went to a Johns Hopkins Women's Forum a couple of years ago, and that's what they did. They had the chicken on a side dish for people that wanted it, but the rest of the meal was plant-based, and I thought that was just perfect, Because if you tell yourself you can't have it and you still want it, that's going to cause a lot of stress, and you're going to have it anyway. You're just not going to tell me. That's okay. So, I think transitioning, if that's what you want to do, I think it's a great idea. Some people go cold tofurkey, and they do it, and they just deal with it, But I take vitamin B12. I make sure I do that. I also take an iodine supplement. Iodine is probably for all of us actually the hardest nutrient to get enough of, and potassium. So, but I get your blood work done. I had all my blood work done. Everything was great. 4 years, and it was fabulous. So I'm very happy about that. So definitely, I believe in doctors. They're good for something, But yeah, starter guides are really good, and I've got some on my website. And just take it day by day, and expand your food options too. Like I have some hemp seeds, hemp hearts that I put in my smoothies in the morning. I never used to do that. Have a few nuts and things like that, and seeds. They're great for protein and nutrients. Does that help? Okay.
Daniel.
Hey Nancy, thanks. Very nice presentation.
Thank you.
As you are presenting your slides, so I was looking, the whole presentation, 68 slides, something like that?
68 slides, yeah.
Yes. Personally, what caught my attention the most was when you showed the picture of the way that the animal is treated.
Oh, yeah.
So I was wondering, many people has this...
What's the best way to
to create more impact. Do you think that showing those pictures will promote more movies, documentary, to get the mainstream? Because, even myself, I was not so educated after you went to all your presentation about, the data. Because this data is not out there. It is, but people is not going to look at because, there is the industry is very strong. So in your opinion, what's the best way to create a very strong impact in the population to change the source of the ingredient?
Right.
Not to have a better nutrition.
That's also a really good question. I was going to say, Daniel, you can't ask questions, but thank you for asking that question. I'm just joking. It's often behavior change precedes beliefs change in massive amounts in culture. And so having things accessible and affordable and available is probably the biggest thing. But we have to create that demand. So I will go into stores, and sometimes I'll just buy. Today I just bought a pack of vegan butter at Mom's just because I wanted to buy more, and I have 3 packs at home now, and I probably eat too much of it. But we have to create that demand. So I go into restaurants, and that's one of the things I do with Botanic Cuisine, and I have resources on my website that people can download and take to a restaurant and say, we want more plant-based options. You got to tell restaurant owners, they'll sell what you buy, and people buy what they sell, and they sell what you buy. But we, as the consumer, we have all the power. Even more than Congress. There's only, 578 people in Congress, but there's 326 million of us. Let's go storm the Capitol. But yeah, so it's, so I really think the accessibility, and that's why I put this presentation together with so many different points. And I know it's a lot of information. I focused on the health and the compassion aspect because I think those are the 2 biggest drivers. But there are people, there's a soccer team in England that went vegan for the environment. And some people, the environment matters. Some people, it's the health. Some people, it's the compassion. So people come in for different reasons. Some people are going plant-based for health. They don't want to hear anything else about the animals. I say, but dairy is infanticide, and they go, shut up and go away. So you can't make somebody care about something they care about, but almost any angle that you approach, any door that you come in, once you come into that room, then it's easier to grasp all the other reasons. So I think what's important to you, what would be the most important thing to you? And there's so much information out there as well, and like I said, I have a couple handouts. And I guess I have another website that I didn't mention before, but it's called HARP for Animals, HARPFOR Animals, plural.com. And there I give, even if this was a lot of information, where do you go to that website? It's kind of spend a lot of time there. but I have covered like everything much more deeply and more thoroughly even than I did tonight. And there's a section on the animals, but it's at the end, and I feel like if you can go there if you want to, but you don't have to. I think that, you know, it can be traumatizing to see too much of that, and I think we have a natural aversion to suffering and pain, and it's hard to see, but we need to see some of it because we need to know what we're paying for and what our choices are causing, you know. So yeah, I think it's find your passion, find what's important to you, and go with that and go from that. But affordability and accessibility, and that's happening. Things like the Impossible Burger, it's a 100% plant-based burger. It's just like a hamburger. The Beyond Meat burger is plant-based. It's just like a big, thick, juicy burger. It's freaky because now I'm vegan and now I'm this burger connoisseur, you know? And I never got excited about sausage before, but I've got vegan sausage and I love it and I'm so excited about it because it's all plants, you know. It's not the healthiest, I granted, but Field Roast is a great company. Their products are like, I call them more blended food than processed food, so definitely read labels. The isolates, like the soy protein isolate and the pea protein isolates, those are the most highly processed, but all of it is still, in my opinion, better than eating meat, those things, and they're better for the environment and all that good stuff. So, does that answer your question, Daniel? Yes. Okay.
Thank you. Anyone else? Sure.
Thank you for the talk.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I just want to know, as a Christian, most of us, we tend to ask the question, and how come Jesus ate meat? So what's your...
I think he did that in that time. That was probably what they needed to do in that time. They might not have had the agricultural systems that we have now to grow such an abundance of food and have access to it. So if you're in a place and that's your only option for food, then you got to eat. There are villages that are in far less developed countries than ours that are very dependent upon fishing, and unfortunately we're wiping out the oceans. And many of them can't, they're going like quinoa now, or there's a place like in some place in South America, they had a big lake and it dried up. And so I feel like if you need, that's what you need to eat, then that's what you need to eat, you know. Yeah, and and there were a lot less people, so it's a whole different system. And we know more about nutrition. I bet if Jesus came here now, it would be very interesting to see if he would be vegan or not, you know. But also in the Bible, there's that first Genesis 1:29 that clearly states, you know, everything I've given to you, the plant, you know. And then later on, after the flood, apparently God said it was okay to eat some meat because there was nothing else around, you know. So, and there's a lot of things in the Bible that we consider unethical today, horrible things that they did. There's slavery and stuff like that. So, you know, I think that religion, that's the difference between religion and spirituality. And religion is more like a cultural thing, and spirituality, for me, in my opinion, it's something that helps us break away from the cultural norms, like the Matrix, into the blue pill instead of the red pill, you know. So religion is like the blue pill, and I don't remember which one, and you know, spirituality is something that helps us break free from those illusions. And you know, I've always been like out of mainstream most of my life. I got into meditation when I was 16, and I'm 63 now. So when I got into meditation, people have always been looking at me sideways for the way I've been. I was vegetarian then and doing meditation, and you know, but now we see that's really a good thing, you know. So what happened for me in that moment of awakening that I had was like, my God, it's unethical to turn sentient beings into commodities. It was very powerful, and it felt like a universal truth. It didn't feel like just my thing, you know. So that's why I'm very passionate about what I do. And then there's so much science. So look it up, you know, look it up and see what makes sense to you. See what makes sense to you. I know. Congratulations on your diet. I think it helps a lot. Yeah.
I wanted to share.
Well, you know, before I became vegan, I used to have to wear foundation because my skin was pasty and uneven. It looked bad. And about 2 or 3 months into it, I looked in the mirror and I went, well, my skin looks really good. And I think it's been getting better, so I never have to, just a little bit of makeup, you know, to perk me up a little bit. Some blush and some lipstick. You know.
So I just wanted to share a comment from the web. Leticia Klausner, who is a vegan.
Who?
I do know. It's a friend of ours
okay.
who's watching over the web.
Oh.
She lives in Maryland, but kind of far from here. She's been watching. She's also a vegan, and she's a medical doctor. She says that, she said, I recommend nutritionfacts.org for nutrition information. For recipes, she says, I like Minimalist Baker and The Spruce. I believe the lady from The Spruce has some young children too. For makeup options, there's NYX, Kat Von D, Elf, and it's just as a sidebar, the makeup company Kat Von D, and who actually is owned by Kat Von D. She's
An
huge.
Elf, yeah, right.
Yeah, she's a huge promoter of veganism and all things vegetarian. So it's something, just options that I think are much more mainstream now.
Right.
And a lot of bloggers, bloggers and YouTubers and people, because that's what's most popular now for our generation.
Yeah.
It's become pretty popular now to become vegan, vegetarian, which is good because it's good for the environment, we know, and all the data that has come out. And it's actually the data that's existed for decades, but it hasn't really been that acknowledged in the mainstream. So thank you.
Thank you. And on my website, Harp for Animals, I have a whole section about living vegan successfully with resources and things like that. And nutritionfacts.org is a great site. There's very few things. Dr. Michael Greger, it's he researches all over the world and digs, and his videos are short, and with every video you can download all the scientific articles. There's very few things that he said that I thought, I don't know, I'm not too sure about that, and I'll follow up. I never believe 100% of what anybody says. There's rarely, I'm kind of stubborn that way. I'm pretty independent thinker, so I encourage other people to do that too.
Can I pass this around?
Oh, please
Yes.
do, yeah.
One final
Take one
question.
of each. Or two, or three. I got plenty.
Yes.
Mine is HARP, HARP, FOR Animals. Can I get online here?
Sure.
I think I can. I'll take you there. No, .com, harpforanimals.com. So here it is. And there's the section. I've got some videos. And here's the Living Vegan section. And I've got nutrition guidelines, recipe websites, dining out, is it vegan, babies, a whole section about babies, the kids' corner, some great resources for kids, and aging healthfully, vegan athletes, products and doctors, religious support, doing our best, all things like that. And then why. Here's the why part, So everybody's going to have their own why. They're going to have the things that really touch their heart and motivate them the most. So we can just find that. And these are some of the things that come up, with, and here's some quotes. Some of them are mine, This was one of my favorites. When I finally realized how wrong it is to turn sentient beings into commodities, it ended a conflict I didn't know I had. You ever sit in a room and there's background noise and all of a sudden the noise goes off, and then you realize, oh, it's so quiet now, I didn't know, because we adapt. We adapt to noise, and then when the noise is gone, then we, see. So just a lot of inspirational stuff. The Humane Myths, some things that people talk about the Humane Myth. And the Animal Industries page, the first thing I say, proceed with caution, because some of the images are hard to see. I just want people to know ahead of time, And some of those scenes you saw, like starving children, I wanted to mention that a very common practice is that countries, less developed countries with grain, they sell it cheap to the West to feed the livestock. So places that are starving, that they could feed the grain to their own people. Now that's also a matter of politics and economics and all that, but one of the ways to ensure food security, which I didn't really cover because I started running out of time, is actually to feed people plants. Thank you so much. Thank you very
Ms.
much.
Nancy. Thank you.